If you or somebody you know is in the market to buy your first defensive handgun, but you're feeling a little bit anxious about going to that gun store, don't know what questions to ask, we're going to hit a little bit on how to select a gun store that might be a good fit for you, as well as 5 specific questions to ask once you get there that's going to help you streamline the process. This is going to help narrow down to find something a little bit more specific so you're not being steered by that sales clerk behind the counter kind of nudging you towards something that's really not the ideal fit for you. All right, let's get into it. All right, so as we begin, I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and get a notepad. I want you to take the notes from this tutorial with you, and that's going to help focus your conversation with the sales associate behind the counter, and it's also going to help you keep track of the guns that you do try on for size. Now, when you're taking these notes, make sure that you're taking note of the exact make and model and the variation that you have tried on and whether it was a good fit or not a good fit. So if you have to start this process over at another separate gun store, you're not starting over from scratch. That's the importance of taking that notepad with you. So the first thing we're going to do is a bit of market research and look for gun stores local to you in your area. I want you to initially exclude from that list any of the big name stores such as Academy, Cabela's, or Bass Pro Shop. I'm not a hater. I'm actually a big fan of these stores. The reason I want us to exclude those big box stores initially from your list of potentials is because we're going to be trying those guns on for size to make sure they fit your hand size well. We want to handle the guns and dry fire them in the store. If you've seen the 3-part fitment test video of mine, you'll understand that we need to make sure that our trigger finger hits the trigger appropriately, and we also want to dry fire that gun to make sure that everything feels well with the function of the gun in our hand. Those big stores that I named will almost always have trigger locks installed on the guns in the display case. They don't let you dry fire them. They will not remove those trigger locks until you've actually purchased the gun. That becomes problematic when we're trying the gun on for fit. So we're going to exclude those initially. They tend to have better prices than some smaller gun stores, and they have a much better selection, generally speaking, and ammunition is almost always a little bit cheaper at those big name stores. So I'm not saying don't do business with them, but when we're trying these guns on for size, we want to make sure we can actually handle them and test out that trigger via dry fire. All right, so as we go through and do our market research, look at those gun stores that are local to you. I want you to look at the reviews that you see online. I want you to initially ignore the 5-star reviews. We're going to scan down to the 1-star reviews and start there. Take these with a grain of salt. Those with an axe to grind are usually those that are most passionate about writing fiery reviews, but we want to see if there's any common themes, particularly if there's any clerk or any sales associate that they call out in those 1-star reviews by name as being a turd. Go ahead and write those names down so that you know that if you do go to do business with that gun store and you get that associate, you might want to ask politely for someone else. Then we're going to look at the 2, 3, and 4-star reviews. Those that are in the middle range tend to be a little bit more on point. Look to see what the pros and cons are. Again, take those with a grain of salt. Then we're going to look at the 5-star reviews. Particularly look for trends here. Has any sales associate been called out by name in a positive way? If so, then write that name down with a check +++ next to it, because when you decide to go to that gun store, you may want to ask for that person by name and actually let the people there know that you read glowing reviews about that individual online, and that's why you're asking to do business with that associate. All right, so now we've gone through those and we've checked those out. I'm going to check the hours of operation, make sure it's actual a brick and mortar type store. Some FFLs or federal firearms licensees will post their business online as a gun store. Technically it is, but they may do their business out of their home, or they have limited hours by appointment only. You want a place that actually has a selection for you to handle there on the premises. So before we move on from talking about how to select that gun store, also I don't want you to be confused if you see something that says online inventory. If you say shop for guns here, likely what that is, it's an association they have with a vendor. These will be guns that are at a warehouse somewhere off-site. Think of it as drop shipping type arrangement. You go to that website, it looks on the web page that it's branded as the local gun store, but when you select a gun on that, it's actually shipped behind the scenes to that gun store. Then they will receive it, they'll do the paperwork and transfer it to you when it comes in. The reason it's important for you to understand is because those guns may not physically be present there at the gun store. So again, make sure you select a gun store that has an adequate selection there on site in the display case that you can actually touch and handle. So the next thing I want you to do is to determine what is the price range that you're willing to pay, what is within your budget range. Most good modern defensive handguns, a price range of anywhere between $550 to around $750 or $800. That is going to be the average price range of most modern guns. You can find them much more expensive than that. You can also find some that are going to be below $500. However, I would challenge that a lot of those are not something that I would bet mine or my loved one's lives on. Most of the guns within that price range that I just mentioned are going to be somewhat like this. It's going to be polymer frames and grips. The only real steel on it is going to be the slide and the barrel. That is fine. The benefit to this is they tend to be lighter weight, therefore they're more comfortable to carry persistently, and because there's less metal in the design, they tend to be a little bit cheaper. If you're going to get something that is made out of all metal, the frame, barrel, and slide are all metal, there's more metal involved with this in the manufacturing process. Therefore, you're looking at least $800 and up for a gun like this typically. The other drawback is, aside from price, is that it's going to be much heavier, more cumbersome if you will, so you're less likely for most people to carry something like that daily unless it's your duty gun and you're carrying it openly. If it's for most civilians who are more interested in self-defense or defense of loved ones, then more of the polymer type is probably going to be a better fit for you. Whatever you decide upon, that's your decision though. So we're going to figure out that price point. What is the range that you're comfortable with spending on your defensive handgun? And go ahead and write that down on that notepad. Keep in mind there's still some ancillary gear you need to buy along with that initial purchase, such as eye protection, hearing protection, maybe some extra magazines, a holster, stuff like that. Other than the eye and ear protection, which is relatively inexpensive, most other things can wait until you've got some training and some repetitions and you're ready to start carrying. If you impulse buy and you get a crappy holster, then it's not going to be conducive to carry anyway. Might as well wait and make sure you get a good solid one from the get-go. So once you have that price range written down on your notepad of what you have budgeted to spend on that defensive handgun, then you're either going to pick up the phone and call that gun shop, or you, in the 21st century, go ahead and just go online and contact them. If you call them, it's more likely you're actually going to speak with somebody and not fall to the bottom of the queue, and they may or may not respond to you. So the first thing that I want you to start out that conversation with is a statement that I am looking to buy my first defensive handgun, and here is the price range that I'm looking at. Do you have a good selection there in the store for me to look at within that price range? The reason it's important to ask before you go is because some gun stores service a very small niche and they're focused on high-end guns that are going to be in the $1,500 to $2,000 range. They're beautiful works of art. If that's what you're into, that's great, but most of us are not looking to spend that much on a defensive gun that we're going to be carrying every single day, that's going to be getting scuffed up and shot a lot in our practice sessions. So again, we're going to make the statement, I am looking to purchase my first defensive handgun. Do you have a good selection in store for me to look at within this price range? If they say yes, then we're going to move on to question number 2. Do you allow dry fire of the guns you have on display? If they say no, then politely move on to the next gun store on your list. The reason it's important for us to dry fire those guns, as I said before, is we want to make sure that it is an appropriate fit for our hand, and if there's a big, bulky trigger lock on that gun, and you're not able to touch your finger to the trigger, then you're not going to know if you're going to give up that master grip that we've discussed in other sessions in order to touch that trigger. If you cannot maintain that master grip and function the trigger appropriately, that won't be a good fit for you. And I don't want you to realize that after you've made the purchase, because once you have bought that gun, it is yours. You cannot bring it back. All right. Now, before you get off the phone with a gun store, if you found a clerk in your online research that you do want to do business with, then you may go ahead and ask, hey, when is this guy or gal going to be working? I've read some good reviews about them. I'd like to come in when they're on shift so that they can assist me. That will help narrow down not just the gun store, but the time and date that you want to go in person to do this. Now, as far as being able to try the guns on for size, I've typically had better luck with smaller family-owned gun stores, smaller local shops, than I have with big box stores or stores that have a high volume of traffic. If you show up right when they open, there tends to be less customers there. Therefore, you can get better one-on-one time with that sales clerk. Understand that some sales associates get a commission off of sales, so they're going to try to push the easiest sale on you, get you out the door so that the next person in line can be serviced so they can get as many sales in that day as possible. I'm not denigrating that business model, but understand that if you feel that you're being kind of steered towards a certain purchase, there may be a reason behind that. All right, pump the brakes. They're there to serve you. Your role in this is to ensure that you have the best fit for what you're looking for. Let's move on to the third point that we wanted to discuss that's going to even further help narrow down the selection of the gene pool, if you will, of what guns you may be interested in looking at. We want that gun to be a good fit for your hand size, so have an idea when you show up to the gun store if you're looking for a single stack or a double stack. What does that mean? That simply refers to how are the bullets, how's the ammunition stacked within the magazine. A single stack, they're going to be in a single column. Typically what this does is it enables the gun to have a much thinner grip so that it can accommodate much smaller hand sizes. For a double stack magazine, conceptualize that the rounds are kind of in a zigzag pattern, or it has two columns of rounds when it is stacked in the magazine. This typically requires the magazine to be a little bit wider, which necessitates a beefier grip, so it's more conducive to people with medium or large size hands. Here's the deal though. I would always encourage you to lean more towards a double stacked gun than a single stacked, because we have typically about double the ammunition capacity for about the same size gun. If you have very, very small petite hands, then you may be limited to a single stack. But before you get to that point, I would encourage you to ask what double stacks are available that are in your hand size. For example, this one right here is a very narrow grip, but it's actually a double stacked magazine. This one holds 12 rounds of 9mm as opposed to the 8 rounds of 9mm in this magazine. The grips are about the same width. It's just by nature of the design of the magazine and how it's beveled in a certain way that allows them to get more capacity in one than in another of similar size. So for that third point that I want us to consider, when you get to the gun store, we're going to start with the statement, I have X size of hands. What do you have available that may fit my hand size that is in a double stack? That is going to help narrow even more the focus of what they have on display for you to try out. If you cannot find a double stack that will adequately fit your hand size, remember, refer back to the 3-part fitment test, links down below. If you can't find one that's a double stack that fits your hand size well, if they all seem to be too big, then reframe the conversation. Okay, that doesn't seem to be working out with double stacks. Show me some single stack guns that may fit my hand size a little bit better. But I always encourage you to trend more towards a double stack handgun over a single stack, because that extra ammo capacity might come in handy. So the general rule of thumb is, if you have very small petite hands, first ask what in double stack has a very small grip that may fit your hand size. If that doesn't pan out, then ask for a single stack that may be a better fit. If you have extremely large hands, then steer away from single stacks unless it is something, say, in .45 caliber, because those will have bigger grips because it's a much larger round. But if you're looking at a 9mm, then a single stack with big hands is probably not going to be a good fit for you either. If you have medium or average size hands, then you may be able to blend a little bit more of both worlds, which will give you a wider selection. Most of what we're trying to do here is narrow down the potential candidates for good carry guns for you. So a more refined, precise way of leading this question would be with the statement, I have kind of small petite hands. Please show me some double stacked handguns that have very small grip size that may be a good fit for my hands. If that doesn't work, then re-engage and say, okay, none of those are fitting quite appropriately to my liking. Now please show me some single stacks that may fit my hand a little bit better. Or conversely, if you have very large hands, let them know I need something that's going to fit my hand size well. The concern or consideration, if you have very large hands and you're getting a subcompact or micro gun, they're easier for you to conceal. However, when you go to get the grip on that gun, you may find you have very little grip panel space remaining for that support hand to fit, which is important, as well as your support side thumb may end up protruding out near the muzzle. That is bad as well. If it's not obvious, we don't want you to shoot your thumb off. All right, so that wraps up the third thing to discuss with that sales associate. Let's move on to the fourth question to be prepared to ask. If you find a gun and it fits your hand almost perfectly, but you're having difficulty in totally eliminating that little air gap between the web of the hand and the back strap or the beaver tail, and or you're having difficulty of naturally letting your middle and ring fingers fall flat onto the front strap, and or the tips of the middle and ring finger are encroaching a little bit too far onto the side panel of the grip, which is preventing you from getting a good purchase on the real estate on the side of the gun with your support hand, then what may be needed is an additional back strap insert. So if the gun is a close fit but not quite perfect, the fourth thing that we're going to be prepared to ask that clerk is, does this gun come with additional back straps? Back straps, palm swells, grip panels, all means the same thing. They should be able to understand what it is you're asking. If it does, ask them to install the next size larger. If that fixes your grip issue, then that is a contender for the good defensive gun for you. If the next size larger doesn't quite fix the problem, then ask them to install the next larger size, which may fine-tune your grip on the gun. If that clerk looks at you like the proverbial hog looking at a wristwatch, take a deep breath and say, okay, do me a favor, could you go and pull the box that that gun comes in? I'd like to see what accessories come with it. When they come back with that box, what they will likely show you is something like this. And when you open it up, it will likely have whatever extra magazines are coming with the gun. Most new guns will come with 2 or 3 magazines, so make sure that whatever's supposed to come with it based off of the manufacturer's specifications is in there and somebody hasn't absconded with 1 or 2. But what we're looking for particular to fine-tune that grip is additional grip panels. So these backstrap attachments, some may be just smooth, so it's just adding a little bit more depth to the web of the grip, if you will. And some may have what we refer to as a beaver tail. This right here may be particularly useful for you if you're having trouble eliminating that air gap and keeping the web of the hand sucked up nice and snug into the back of the gun. If the gun comes with that assortment of back straps or grip panels, then ask that sales associate if they can pretty please install the next size bigger for you so you can try it on again. You will very likely find that if you add that little bit of extra girth to the grip, then it will fit perfectly in your hand if it was almost there already. Again, if they look at you like a hog looking at a wristwatch, then say, is there somebody else here that might be able to perhaps assist us with this? And somebody likely in the gun store will be able to come over and rickety-tick install those so you can check it and see if it fixes the fit. I'll do a quick video and link it down below that will detail how to install these on a couple of different guns. Generally, they all install the same way. Some manufacturers are slightly different than others. I'll put 2 different examples. I'll put a Glock and a Smith & Wesson M&P. That'd be a separate video. I'm not going to bog this one down with it. All right, so that would be the 4th thing we're prepared to ask, which brings us to the 5th and final question I want you to be prepared to ask that salesperson. If you like the fit and function of that gun, but you feel that the length of either the slide or the grip is a bit too long for you to comfortably conceal and carry every single day, then the 5th thing to be prepared to ask that sales clerk is, does this gun come in a slightly smaller variation? For example, if what you're trying on is a Glock 17, a full-size duty gun, it comes in a Glock 19, which is the same exact gun. The grip profile, everything is the same, except the slide is about an inch or so shorter and the grip is a little bit shorter. You're giving up a couple of rounds in capacity in the magazine size, but as far as the fit of the gun goes and your ability to manipulate the controls on the gun, everything should be identical to the bigger Glock 17. Also be mindful, there's a variation of the Glock 19 that's called the Glock 19X. The 19X is the same length of slide, but it has the grip length of the Glock 17, so it has the higher capacity magazines. If that gun fits you well, then ask yourself, does that extra grip length, is that going to make things poke out and protrude and cause you to print a little bit more? Printing is the term for if it's obvious that you have an outline of a gun that you're trying to conceal. In many states, that is not an issue if somebody can see the print of the gun, but it may be a comfort thing where you don't want anybody to know. And conversely, if the gun is too small for your hand size, that's not good either. If you don't think that that is a good fit for you, ask if that gun comes in a next size variation. Now, I want you to be very mindful of how you ask that question, however. If you ask the clerk, do you have this gun, but in a slightly larger or smaller variant, what they're likely going to hear you ask is, do I have this gun here in the display case to sell to you right now today? What would be a better way of wording this question is this gun offered in a slightly larger or smaller variant? That is different than asking, do you have this? I want you to ask, is this offered? Does the manufacturer make this in a little bit bigger or smaller variant? If the manufacturer does make it in a variation that will fit better, then you can either write that down as a better potential and find a gun store that does have it in stock so you can try it on for size, or if you're feeling confident with it, then you can ask that gun store to place it on order for you, and when it comes in, you'll go do the paperwork. Now understand that with most places, you're going to pay when you order it. You're not going to be able to turn it away once it shows up. So make sure you have that conversation with the clerk before you commit to it. Hopefully this was helpful in narrowing the aperture of things for you to select and helping to structure that conversation to ease those nerves when you go to the gun store for the first time. Remember, take that notepad with you, have the parameters of what you're willing to spend, have an idea of what you might be interested in size-wise, if it's almost a perfect fit but not quite, if there's any fine-tuning that needs to occur, that we ask if it comes with extra grip panels, and ask them to actually install them while you're there so you can try it on for size. If you think the gun is still a bit too big or too small for you to comfortably carry, does it come in a variation that may fit a little bit better? And we're taking all these notes down so that if we need to bug out and go to some other store, then we can take our notes and we're not starting from scratch. In the end, it's your money, it's your life. Find what's going to fit you well, something you're going to practice with and carry every single day. All right, I hope this was helpful. Throw some comments down below if you have any questions. Until next time, God bless you and stay safe.